Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Fernando de la Peña, and this is our HoloCast, a combination of a hologram and a podcast. And today I have with me Anthony Bruins, a.k.a. Commander Why Not. Anthony, welcome. Please let us know who you are, please.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Fernando. My name is Anthony C. Bruins I. I am a successful failure. When I tell people that, they like, a successful failure, well, what does that mean? That's basically stating that I'm one of these individuals that I'm a creative and innovative person, and I'm always trying or striving to do things that never been done before, and in that process, I always fail. And the key is to fail fast, fail early, fail often, so that you can get to the knowledge acquisition curve as quickly as possible, finding what works and what does not work. Hence, the making of a successful failure.
Amazing. So, talking about that, what is SIF? What is systemic failure?
SIF is a concept of thinking methodology. It stands for Systemic Intelligent Fast Failure. And I have something that is basically called SIF quantum thinking. And when you're exercising or going through SIF, you are actually utilizing the left side of your brain, the right side of your brain, the 10 levels of your mind. Most people don't even know that they have 10 levels of the mind, just like people don't know if they're left brain dominant or right brain dominant. But the 10 levels of the mind are the conscious, subconscious, superconscious, alpha, beta, theta, delta, sensory mode, rhythm, mu, and gamma frequencies. Those are the various frequencies of the mind where you're listening to thoughts that come to you. Now, the last component of SIF is this integration of the senses. I learned about the integration of senses per my other alter ego, Dr. Positive, the dogologist, dog psychiatrist, who helps dogs with people problems. But when you integrate the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, the 10 levels of the mind and senses all at the same time, you literally become a multi-dimensional thinker where you are navigating across various dimensions, where you're integrating those various frequencies of your minds that is being processed on the left and right side of your brain. And then when you integrate the various senses, you just learn to think basically like a quantum system.
Wow, that's amazing. And Anthony, I heard that you are one of the first holonauts. Is that right?
That is correct. I worked with you, Dr. Fernando and Dr. Smith, and a team of subject matter experts in mission control from the security and network areas and infrastructure hardware. And we tested high resolution XR holographic technologies from mission control to the ISS, making sure that data transmission was secure end to end. And because of that testing, I became the first in mission control African American to be holoportated to the International Space Station, hence making me a holonaut.
And I heard that this is not your first experience with the space station. I remember that you mentioned that you created a three-dimensional representation of the space station, like 20 years ago? Is that right?
Yes. When I was the Mission Control Center Systems Chief Architect, I led a team to write the vision for the Mission Control Center in 2004. As a result of that, I also was the director of the Quest Innovations Laboratory, where I created a lab with no money. And I got $3.5 million worth of hardware and software, and from various vendors, being the MCC architect. So at that particular time, we were looking at moving from FIDI to switched Ethernet. And as the MCC chief architect, my role was to figure out how to develop a new systems architecture relevant to network communications. And so I had no money. A gentleman named, my branch chief at the time was named Stephen Gonzalez. And he was the branch chief of the Operations Research and Development branch. And I also worked with another gentleman named Mitchell Maha, who was the branch chief of the Control Center branch. And our division chief was Jack Knight, an old Apollo guy. And so as a result of that, Steve gave me about $20,000. That's all he had, but he believed in me. And he believed in, at the time, intelligent fast failure. We hadn't gotten to SIF yet. I was exercising intelligent fast failure, which was developed by Dr. Jack V. Matson, emeritus professor from Penn State University, who's been a mentor, a father, a teacher. I've known Dr. Jack Matson currently now 43 years. So in the spirit of intelligent fast failure, I had to figure out how to get that architecture built with no money. I had a lab, or should I had a room, but I had no money. But what I did have was real-time shuttle station data. I had a data link. And so I realized that being a director of the Quest Innovations Laboratory, I needed to start thinking like a businessman. So I said, what product do I have? I said, I have real-time shuttle station data. I need to test these various networks and workstations per this new architecture before we put them in operations. Because during the systems engineering process, which we execute, failure is very, very important during the design, development, integration, and testing of any system before it gets to operations. As Mr. Eugene Krantz says, flight director, failure is not an option when we're in orbit and when we're in operations. It's just not an operation. It's just not an option. But failure is the option when the design, development, integration, and testing of any system. So in the spirit of intelligent fast failure and SIF, I knew I needed to fail early, fail often, and fail fast so that I can get to the knowledge acquisition curve as quickly as possible, finding out what was going to work and was not going to work. So I operated like a businessman. And so I called in Cisco and I said, hey, you're the incompetence. Your system is working in here. We got to replace these networks. I would like for you to let me utilize some hardware so that I can put it in my environment and test it. They sent me $1 million worth of hardware. Well, because I work for the government as a civil servant, I used to be also a contracting officer, technical representative, a COTAR. I also knew that I needed to make sure that I had open and full competition. So I called Nortel and Accutel and Intreris and said, hey, we're looking at upgrading our networks and we're looking at the latest and greatest network hardware and software to support that. Each one of those companies sent me $1 million worth of hardware. Well, I only had now, I just got the hardware. So we have HP. At the time we had HP in the control center. We still have HP in the control center. But if I'm replacing the network, I got to replace the workstations that run on the network because A plus B plus C equals D, and it's a system. Hence, systemic thinking, systemic intelligent fast failure. So I call HP. I say, hey, HP, I'm upgrading my network, and you're the incompetent. Can you send me some workstations? They sent me 6 workstations and 3 laptops. And again, in the spirit of competition, I had to open it up for IBM and Apple. Well, we had, at the time, IBM workstations were basically supporting our planning system. HP workstations supported our mission control center systems. So I had to get the planning in there. So IBM, they had already had workstations in there, and they sent me 3 workstations. So now I've got the development of a system, and then we brought in Apple. They were new to the game, so I had to make sure that I keep it full and open competition. So they gave me 3 laptops. So now I got an architecture of hardware, software from the incompetents that have their technologies in the control center. But I said, hey, listen to me. I said, my objective is to break your systems. I have to break your hardware and your software into this architecture. So I'm going to need you guys to send me your subject matter experts, because I want to make sure your stuff is configured optimally to operate like how you want it, because we had a 1-minute failover requirement that we had to meet, and I want to make sure that their hardware and software was operating like they're designed it and how they had proposed it was in their brochures. So I got a year of engineering support, systems engineering support for a whole year from all 3 vendors. And then we basically had a shootout. And we brought the end users in, the flight controllers, who operate the system and develop their use cases. We had functional requirements that had to be validated, as well as our overall concept of operations. And we did all that, and as a result of that, we came out with a new architecture for the Mission Control Center, where we went from switch Ethernet to, we went from FIDI to switch Ethernet.
Wow, so essentially, this is kind of a Murphy's Law. So instead of me trying to create a checklist about what will work, I need to do something like the opposite, figure out what will not work, trying to fail, and try to do it fast so I can improve my process. Is that right?
That is correct. I'll give you an example. I had one of the Cisco representatives. This is, I'm still the networks guy in Mission Control. We just rolling out or striving to implement a new network, because we have to address the Executive Order 14028 by the Biden administration and the Department of Homeland Security and the NIST requirements relevant to developing a cybersecurity infrastructure to stop lateral movement across federal networks. So, being a networks guy, I basically was looking at the next generation of hardware again. And so I called my Cisco representative, and they were saying, hey, this is where we're going now with the hardware, and we'd like to sell you some hardware, to support this new proposed architecture that you guys are trying to develop. And I said, well, okay. I say, can you tell me how your hardware works? So the guy was explaining to me how his hardware works. It was going to cost me $250,000 for this switch, or $500,000 for this chassis, where I could add slots of blades in it, and just all this glossy brochures and conversations about how the switches were going to work. And I said, that's great. I said, but can you tell me how your switches don't work? And the guy said, what? I said, can you tell me how your switches do not work? He said, what? I said, can you tell me how your switches don't work? You telling me how they work. I want to know how they don't work, because failure is not an option in operations. He said, nobody ever asked us that question before. So I said, tell you what, give us your switches, and my team and we're going to break them. And we're going to tell you exactly how they do not work. And that exactly is what we did. They gave us some switches, proposed switches. We integrated them with our firewall, because I got to have a secure network now because of the lateral movement. And in the process of stress testing and breaking them, not only did we break the switch, but we broke the firewall. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. But breaking the firewall was a surprise. That spent us down the path of developing a new architecture that's called Mission Systems, parentheses, Mission Control Center / Training Systems / Space Vehicle Mock-up Facility, parentheses, because Mission Systems consists of 3 facilities: secure network segmentation, architecture, and design. We had to integrate 3 facility networks into one, developing a network security infrastructure to stop lateral movement across NASA's Mission Control Center and Facility Networks. Now, note, in the process of that, when we was moving down the road for the CDR, the existing KBR MSOC template for CDR is 2 months. It took us 24 months, a.k.a. 2 years, to get to our CDR because it was that complex. We had never done that before in mission control. So I was blessed and fortunate enough to lead the team to create a new mission system secure network segmentation architecture. And we're striving to integrate, or should I say, implement pieces of it now. We got that CDR approved in December 2022. So yes, I wanted to know what was not going to work before I put it in operations and before we utilize it to interface mission control with the International Space Station. That type of stuff had never been done before in mission control. And that was an example of systemic intelligence fast failure, quantum thinking. Now, in parallel with that, I disclosed 3 NASA technology disclosures / patent applications to proceed with patent applications. After speaking with the NASA Commercialization Technology and Transfer Office and NASA Legal, they decided not to pursue those 3 patents of out-the-box thinking, thinking differently relative to this particular architecture because they considered it trade secrets. And I was a little disappointed. I was a lot disappointed because in my career, I have disclosed at least 26 NASA technology disclosures / for 4 patent applications in my 38 and a half years. And the only one that they wanted to pursue back in 2003 or 2004 was the 3D digital virtual human that was anatomically precise, biomechanically accurate, physiologically realistic. You could sever the nerves, break the bones, simulate disease of function and trauma running on a PC. And I integrated 16 different technologies to show a virtual human moving in a virtual spacesuit showing contact and pressure points. And we also integrated, and I worked with Stanford University, Dr. Kevin Montgomery, the director of the National Biocomputational Center, where we developed also a wireless intelligence sensor suit that captures position and orientation on the XYZ yaw pitch roll axis real-time and playback. I would put that on an astronaut, capture the physiological data, put it in a virtual human, and play what ifs and now what's before we cut the first piece of hardware. And NASA had never done a patent with 16 different technologies. Usually it's like 2 or 3. But they called in a law firm from Houston called Osher & May, and they sat down with me and my team, and they took it out of our heads. Although I did not get that patent application awarded, I fought with the United States Patent and Trademarks Office for 3 years. They wrote law stating that they can dissect my stuff. Because I was telling them A plus B plus C plus D equals E. If you take out one piece of this equation, if you take out the object registration software, if you take out the biometric software or the anthropometric software, the biomechanics software, the strip prediction software, you break the system. Systemic thinking, because what I had done, I took a human-centered design approach. Instead of building a spacesuit, prototype spacesuit, giving it to the astronaut, they put it on, they say, it's too tight here, or can you make this longer, or can you make the hut bigger, because some astronauts, have larger chests and et cetera. We cut that by doing it virtually, because I was staying on top of the technology, because at the time, Boeing had just developed the 777 via what they call virtual and rapid prototyping virtually before they cut the first piece of hardware. And so although I didn't get that patent, but it felt great that they had the right law to beat me. And so that was pretty exciting for me.
That's amazing. Anthony, I also heard that you are working with dogs, and one of the main problems with dogs is that we as humans we fail to communicate and understand dogs. We treat the dogs like humans, and that's one of our mistakes. Can you please tell me more about that?
Yeah, let me give you a little background how I got into Dr. Positive. In 1993, I purchased a pit bull dog. His name was Bruno. And I'm always challenging myself, doing the impossible possible. And I said, I want to get into this dog's head. Now, the American Pit Bull dog is considered, supposed to be one of the most vicious and insane dogs there is. I wouldn't have anything but an American Pit Bull dog or an American Bulldog, which I have had a couple. Still got one, and I got a couple American Bulldogs. Pit Bull dogs. And so I wrote these functional requirements, being an engineer and a visionary. I wanted a dog that I could send on a distant attack. Oh, wait a minute. Made a mistake. Come back and say. I wanted a dog that would bark before he bites. I wanted a dog that could discriminate against friendly or aggressive behavior, when I'm walking with my kids or family, and the dog just automatically turns on, and I learned how to turn him off. Because I also wanted a dog, per my requirements, that would bark before he bites. I basically wanted a loaded weapon on command. So I did a market survey, 1993, going into 1994. And one of the largest dog training companies in Houston stated that I can't meet all your requirements, but I can meet some of them. And one other requirement, I want to be able to control the dog to come sit, stay downhill, off leash, or sit, stay down, stay. Don't move until I tell it to move. And this particular company said, we can't meet all those requirements, but I can meet some of them. But it's going to cost you $1,800 and your dog at my facility for 6 weeks. And I didn't have $1,800. I told them that's not going to work. And I'm not going to leave my dog at your facility because I don't know what you're going to do to it. So I continued to go down the phone book. And I ended up speaking with a gentleman that said the following to me. If I can't train your dog in 15 minutes, it's free. I said, what? He said, if I can't train your dog in 15 minutes, it's free. I said, okay. I got a dog that's now 7 months old. We're in January now, 1994. I got a dog that's 7 months old. I can't get it to come consistently. And you're going to make this dog come sit, stay down here, off leash in less than 15 minutes? He said, that is correct. I said, well, how much do you charge? He said, I charge $250. I said, well, you know what? I like those odds. Because in my mind, I'm thinking and saying, nobody can make a dog come sit, stay downhill, off leash in 15 minutes. Better yet, on leash in 15 minutes, but off leash in 15 minutes? I figured I had never seen anything like that. So I was like, okay. So I go out to the gentleman's house. I have my dog. And I said, sir, if you can do what you say you can do, no one is going to believe me. I brought my video recorder. Well, that just insulted the guy. He was an Italian guy. Insulted him, hurt his ego or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, I tell you what we're going to do. He said, I'm going to make your dog come sit, stay down here off leash in 15 minutes. And then you're going to cut on your camera. You're going to video record it. We're going to take the tape out the camcorder, because it was 1994. They had those big ones in. And we're going to take that tape and go and put it in my VCR in my house. Here's the punchline. And then he said, we're going to see just how long it took me to train your dog. I said, okay. To make a long story shorter and a shorter story the shortest, this guy made my dog come sit, stay downhill, go in the house, come out the house, get in the car, get out the car. No leash, no collar in 10 minutes. And then he looked at me and said, I thought you said you needed your dog trained. And while he was ego tripping, as clearly as I'm speaking to you on this day, one day, 2 days ago, as my mother was laid to rest in peace, mother, on the 16th, God spoke to me and said, dog training is not having a dog train. Dog training is having a human train to think and see the world the way the dog sees it. And I spent 2 years of my life working with Bruno, failing to learn how to think and act like a dog. My dog Bruno is the one who taught me how to think and act like a dog. And in 1996, I made a 6-week-old puppy come sit, stay downhill, off leash in 5 minutes. And I've done it as fast as 60 seconds. So I took all that information, and then I became an adjunct professor at Lone Star College in Tomball. And that's how I got all the data. I knew I had proved that it's not the dog that needed to be trained, but the human. That's how I got all my data, because I had 20, 15 people per class, and I'm educating them and training them how to train their dogs, and I'm not even touching them. So I got all the data. I wrote the book, The 5-Minute Dog Trainer. It's still out there. I stopped selling it because, people were reselling it and making more money on the book than I did. And I only wanted to utilize that gift to, my vision is to save dogs' lives and humans' hearts. There are over 80 million dogs in America, 63 million in homes, and I wanted my product in the home of the average American, because the dog is like a family member. But if you do not know how to communicate with the dog, you can't control it. So during that whole process, I never knew that I was leveraging Pavlov's research on classical conditioning, B.R. Skinner's on operative conditioning, Frank Cialdini, Albert Bandura, Winnie Morrow, Edward Thorndike, and Desmond Morrison's research on cognitive modeling, as well as imprinting, deprinting, malprinting. But I did learn that, per my research, Dr. Positive, that all learning begins with the senses. And what the dog sees, smells, tastes, feels, hears is recorded subconsciously in diverse environments. So being a visionary architect and a systems architect / systems engineer and innovator, I integrated Pavlov's research, Skinner's research, Bandura, Cialdini, Morrow, Thorndike, Desmond. I integrated all these giants that came before me with my research, developing the human canine interface where it's a system. Hence, this is an application of utilizing SIF quantum thinking to solve a complex problem in the dog training industry. But I didn't know I was building and standing on the shoulders, as they say, of giants. So if you're arguing or disputing my concept, you're disputing all these other gentlemen's research that went before me. They all had the solution, but they had a piece of the solution. I just was blessed enough to add my piece into the system to develop the human canine interface. And that's basically is what I call dogology, which is a psychology of the imprinting of everything the dog is seeing is going into the subconscious environment. Subconscious mind in diverse environments. That's the psychology a part of it. That's the dogology. And the science of it was through Pavlov and Skinner and all these other great men. So I just integrated it all together, coming up with dogology and what I call canine communication and control. That's how I got to this point. And I have to make sure that I educate the homeowners on the science, the psychology, and genetics of animal behavior based on dogology and canine communication and control. Because it's not the dog that needs to be trained, it's the human that needs to be trained. And I educate and train the human and the dog at the same time. That's 2 for 1. And my first student is the one who told me that rest in peace, his name was Derek Wayne Malbrough. He was a quadriplegic. I gave him a pit bull dog, and everybody thought I was crazy for giving a quadriplegic guy a pit bull dog. Well, I had given all the other kids in the neighborhood pit bull dogs. Why shouldn't he have one? So I spoke with his mother and his family, and they thought it was great. And I gave it to him on Christmas, wrapped in a red bow. That dog name was Brandy. And he learned how to communicate and control that dog. I brought him to Talmud College with me one day and let him watch me train. And he looked at me. He asked me, he said, "Brother, do you know what you're doing?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "Do you know what you're doing?" He said, "I'm not saying it like that." He said, "But do you really know what you're doing?" I called him the wise guy. I said, "No, wise guy, tell me what I'm doing." He said, "Man, you're training a dog and a human at the same time." I said, "What?" He said, "You're training the dog and the human at the same time." And I'm like, wow. So I had my other partner with me. His name is Todd Burrell, and he was into strength and conditioning dogs. And so that's when I created the Animal Intelligence Agency, which is my nonprofit, and K9 Communication and Control, which is my profit. And those were my first two members of my team. They're the foundation of AIAC3. And so I got to keep it going, and that's how I got into this.
That's amazing. And I heard that you want to take it to the next level with this holographic teleportation technology, creating a holodog. Is that right?
That's correct. Dr. Positive, a.k.a. the HoloDog. And the whole objective, now this is an example of NASA spinoff. NASA develops technology. NASA develops a lot of technology that people don't even know about that's into the real world. I was blessed and fortunate enough to help Dr. Fernando to do his thing in space. And how I met Dr. Fernando, besides through AXA Tech, was helping him and Dr. Schmidt at NASA. But we were in a meeting one day, and he told me he had a dog, and he told me he had a dog problem. And I said, "Well, okay, I'm Dr. Positive. Let me help you with your dog problem." And then he said, "Okay." So I came by, and he introduced me to both his dogs. One has passed, rest in peace. And I educated Dr. Fernando and trained Dr. Fernando to make his dog come sit stay down here off leash in less than 5 minutes. And then at that point, I said, "Hey, Dr. Fernando, this is an application of your technology that we could utilize for the dog training industry." Hence, I holoportate in, or I like to say, I beam in, I educate and train the human and the dog at the same time, and I beam out. I didn't know that Dr. Fernando was my proof of concept to validate how his technology can be utilized. So as a result of that, I trademarked the HoloDog, and my vision is to build upon the HoloConnect app and develop use cases of all the scenarios that I can think of relevant to educating, teaching people how to make their dogs come sit stay downhill, fix their peeing problem, pooping problem, chewing problem, digging problem, aggression problem, grinding problem, whining problem, fence dashing problem, barking problems. I can fix all those, and I don't even have to touch your dog. And I give you another example. Dr. Fernando called me one day and he said, "My dog is barking. How do I get it to stop barking at night?" Well, I introduced him to what I call the Bruins brainwave breaker, the Breed 3 bomber. I told him how to create one. As a matter of fact, I'm making a real product of it now, but I taught him how to create one. I told him how to use it. He executed. Notice, I do human training for dogs. That's the title of my new book, or updated book, Human Training for Dogs. I just told him what to do. I told him why the dog is doing it. I told him why the dog is not doing what he wants him to do. I taught him how the dog is seeing the world as a dog, learning and teaching him how to think and act like a dog. I taught him how to establish himself as the alpha dog, as the pack leader, establishing the chain of command. Because dogs see humans as Dogs see humans as dogs. They're not looking at you as human. The biggest problem that humans have, they want to anthropomorphize the dog. A dog is a dog is a dog. A dog's going to be a dog. So you got to do what I call the flip-flop, i.e. the Bruins flip-flop, the flip it in effect. Instead of trying to get the dog to think like a human, the human has got to flip that mindset and think like the dog. Hence, canine communication and control. Hence, dogology. And I just told him what to do. When the dog would bark, he would just get up at night and just go shake the can. The dog shut up. He said, good girl, done. Then it becomes conditioned response and based on repetition and consistency. And that's how I virtually taught him how to fix his barking problem.
Well, that's amazing, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This is one of our first HoloCast. And it's great to be one of our first guests here. Don't move, let me have a selfie with you with this technology. Smile.
Somebody out there knows what that means.
Yeah.
She knows what that means. It's my wife. She knows what that means.
Amen. Thank you, Anthony. It's my honor to have you here.
Thank you.